Hello and good afternoon, everybody. 2 o'clock on Friday, and we're ready to do another financial wellness daily webcast discussion. Today, we've got Russ Golowin again joining us as always, and today we're going to be talking about pet trusts, which is going to be an interesting conversation. Couple things, wanted to go through our normal pre-disclosure discussion. First of all, disclosure here, take a look at this. It's about COPEC, our speakers, our affiliated companies, and because my company is and Jerry's and we're acting as hosts, we also run retirement strategies, and we are also on the board. So therefore, we have additional disclosure on there for retirement strategies. So thank you all for joining us today. We'll be going from 2 to 2:30, and if there's any additional questions, we're happy to extend that all the way to 3 o'clock. So feel free to send in questions at any time. We really encourage that. And thank you so much for attending. Anyway, we'll go ahead and get the program going. Again, we got Russ Golowin, who is an elder law attorney and does a lot of work with people with trusts and wills and probate and Medicaid and things like that. And so today, Russ, we're talking about pet trusts, right?
That's right. So basically, we're just going to be discussing how and why pet owners should put some provisions in their estate planning to, number one, name a caregiver for their pets. Number two, make sure they're cared for when they're incapacitated or die, and also how to make sure there's some money available for that caregiver to make sure that it's really not a hardship for the person they choose to care for that pet and pay for their food, medical expenses, and things like that.
Wow, it's always interesting because we don't think about that too often. In many situations, we just had a meeting the other day where we are meeting with a recently widower whose spouse passed away, and we were talking about, okay, well, we do have to, deal with your legal documents because the transition from a spouse to a spouse is pretty simple. And a lot of people, I think, make light of it, right? Because it is pretty quick and simple compared to a non-spouse. So it really opens people's eyes going, oh my gosh, that's right. I got to start thinking these things through. Well, the same thing goes with pets. If you have two spouses and one of them passes away, the other spouse is there and it's just a natural flow, right?
Yeah.
But what if you really, really, really care about your pets and there is no natural progression with a spouse, or, sometimes maybe there's a sibling or a child that naturally would go to. Otherwise, we don't want our pets to maybe be a burden to somebody else. Is that kind of what we're tying into here?
Yeah, exactly. First of all, it's somewhat like naming a guardian for your children. You want to make sure that your pets go to somewhere that they'll be cared for. So, of course, even if you don't create any legal documents, you're going to want to at least talk to somebody to see if they are willing to take your pets. But the problem is most people don't think about it. They don't talk about it. They don't create any legal documents. And so then it becomes just up to somebody that knows them, maybe in their family, maybe not, to step forward and take this animal. And unfortunately, some people might be unable to do that just because, I don't know, maybe they have allergies, maybe their current pets don't get along with other animals, or in some cases, the most perfect caregiver just might not have enough money to pay for the food and the vet bills and any emergencies that come up. So that's why it is really important to think it through, make sure there's some legal documentation set forth in advance so that there's a caregiver and some backups, and make sure whoever is caring for the animal has access to funds to provide whatever that pet needs.
Yeah, especially if you have enough assets that is going to be passed on to a number of people, right? You really want to make sure that that isn't lost in the the financial discussion. All of a sudden these 6 people, let's say, get money, but nobody wanted the pet or something, right? Or they do, but like you said, they just, or maybe they weren't the primary beneficiary or something of that nature. But it really, You know, it's one thing to take on maybe a vehicle or something like that. It's another thing to take on a pet. So that's it,
right.
especially unique pets, right? I mean, some people have llamas or.
Oh yeah. Yeah, horses. I mean, it's one thing to leave your 12-year-old cat to one of your children, for example, if you have children, but it's another thing if you have horses or other animals that are just very costly to maintain. And, you know, trying not to really say it, but to be clear, the worry is if there's not enough money or there's not a caregiver that is able to provide for the pet, they could end up in a shelter. And if no one adopts them, you know, unfortunately, they might have to be put to sleep. And of course, none of us with pets would want that to happen.
So yeah, you can really provide that assurance that that animal is going to live either with somebody in a good life, or at least through a alternative where people would get paid to still maintain that good life for that animal.
Right, exactly.
So, you know, when we get to, so we have somebody that we're talking to, or we are feeling like, you know what, I never thought about that. I never thought about, you know, I know that my son or daughter or sister will take my animal, whatever that animal is, but I never thought about the financial side of it. And I do want to take care of them and make sure that not only is the animal taken care of, because they would, but that they have the resources to do it, and the appreciation to provide them those dollars. So, you know, what is the best way to really plan for this?
Yeah, I mean, really the best way is to create something called a pet trust. And that could be created while you're living, actually be a document and a trust that's in place, or it could be something that you create in your will, or if you have a revocable trust, it would make sense to create it in your own trust. And so what's happening is when you die, this bucket comes into place, and money, a certain amount that you pick, will go into that bucket specifically for that pet or for all of your pets together. And you'll name somebody that's in charge of that money, and that's a trustee. So you have a trust, a trustee that's in charge of the money. You're gonna, like I said before, name a caregiver and some backups if the caregiver that you have number one in line can't do it. And then what you're gonna have also is a remainder beneficiary, which is a charity or another person or group of people that will receive any money that's left over after all those pets live their full life and pass away. The reason why that's the best way to do it is it provides certainty. You know where the money is going. You know that that trustee is required by law to care for that pet and not use the money for their own purposes. And then you know where the money is going to go if there's any left after the pets pass away. That's the best way to do it. I realize that not everybody is willing or maybe financially able to create a pet trust. So what some people do, and it's certainly better than nothing, is talk with someone ahead of time that's willing to take the pets. Make sure in your will it says that the pets go to them, because pets are personal property and they should be accounted for in your estate planning. And then what you want to do is make sure that caregiver gets some money to be able to provide that care. The problem is, though, if you're not utilizing a pet trust and you just give money to someone else, either during your life or after you die, that's now their money. So they can use it to buy the motorcycle they've always wanted. They could lose it to creditors, bankruptcy, divorce, lawsuits, all those sorts of things. So you don't have certainty that the money is going to be available or used for that pet with gifts. That's why the trust is superior in most cases.
Yeah, and also when you're older, if you're giving it to, let's say that you live alone in a certain neighborhood and one of your best friends lives next door, but they're the same age, right?
Right.
Well, they may receive the money, they may receive with the full intention, they may receive the animal, but what if they also predecease the animal in some situations, right? Now the money that you gave to them is actually going to their heirs, and
Yeah.
their heirs probably don't care about your animal.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, that's a really, really important point. With that gift, you're kind of just leaving it up to the caregiver to hopefully provide for your pet in their estate planning. But and maybe they will, but probably it's pretty unlikely that they would even think about doing that.
You know, and being in this realm, and I know you are as well. You see, people do a lot of beneficiaries on accounts, 401ks, IRAs, life insurance, right? All those things. Where if they don't have a lot of, they go, I don't care where the money goes. So what do? They ended up, putting it to the Humane Society or cat welfare or whatever it is.
Mhm.
But many times they forgot about their own animals. That is really kind of even hitting me right now in our discussion that, we had one client that had a number of cats, and so she said, I don't really have family. I want to put half the money to my niece and the other half goes to cat welfare. Well, what about your cats? That means they have to go to cat welfare. I mean, you didn't finish that piece for your personal relationship with those animals.
Yeah, I think it's really common that happens just because most people don't know about the pet trusts. They might have heard about it, and if they did, it might have been in regard to Leona Helmsley, who left something like $6 million to her cat or her dog. I can't remember, which of course is not what I'm suggesting and talking about.
Not buying a life insurance policy specifically to cover that pet, yeah.
Right. I mean, that would be reasonable to do if it's some policy that, is $10,000 or whatever you think that pet might need to care for the rest of their life, or again, especially with horses. But I'm not suggesting that they need millions and millions of dollars. But unfortunately, back when this really kind of came into being, at least in Ohio, which I think was around 2007, that's right around the time that the Helmsley case was in the news. And so when that occurred, it sort of got a connotation that it was silly to do this. But in reality,
a frivolous rich person thing, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the reality is even a couple $1,000s is a big deal. It doesn't, like you said, I mean, let's get rid of the millions because obviously that's kind of being ridiculous on this, but you're right. I mean, we talk all the time about, having a little tiny policies to cover our own funerals or those types of things. But putting aside even $5,000, $2,000, $10,000 helps that person greatly. And it's going to be maintained for that animal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple $1,000s could pay for a lot of food. I would think for many animals, several years of food. And I know
carpet replacement.
What's that?
Carpet replacement, things like that. New slippers if you have.
Exactly.
But, it really is interesting, Russ, because I don't think people put enough thought into the fact that, and also, by the way, if you are the son, child, daughter, niece, whatever it is, and you are supporting your own parents, right? You might want to give some guidance. Hey, think about this, mom and dad, because even if it's not you, it might be your sibling that might do it. Let's be responsible and let's help make sure that the people that are going to take on that burden, because whether you're an executor, whether you're caring for an aging parent, or you're caring for these animals or guardianship for children, that is a great commitment. And so a little financial help, not for your time as much, but it's one thing to do it for free, right? It's another thing to also do extra costs. Now, kids and things like that, I think we're always willing to do what we can and all this stuff. But I think the forgotten kid is a lot of these animals, right? And I think it needs a little bit of a heightened awareness that what happens when nobody wants, especially after that second. Sure. The second, like passing or something moves on there. You give it to your son, they get divorced or they pass away. If you're 90 and your son's 65 and they pass away, is, again, who really is going to care the same? Hopefully there's plenty of people in the family that do.
Right. Yeah. And that's the same with all estate planning. It's a good idea to name several backup people that could be that caregiver. And you kind of mentioned it, but you also might want to provide in there that that caregiver is to be paid a particular amount just for providing care for the animal. And in some cases, maybe the caregiver doesn't want to take it and they don't have to take that payment. But in other cases, they might really appreciate a couple $100 a month or whatever amount that you want to provide. So that's something you can do also.
Yeah, I would like to see a little bit more of those types of things implemented, just because, like you said, I don't think people think that part through very much. So
No, I don't
should
think so.
now should a caregiver be the same as an executor, or be the same as, because we talk about like healthcare power of attorney, financial power of attorney, executor. Now all of a sudden caregiver for an animal, right? I mean, there's all these different things. You want to maybe chop those up for us a little bit?
Right. So if you're creating a pet trust, you're going to name the caretaker, right? The person that the pet is living with. You're going to name the trustee. That's the person that's in charge of the money you left behind, earmarked for that pet. And so ideally, those people would not be the same. And the reason is the same exact reason why, if you're naming a guardian for your minor children and a trustee to manage the money you left for your children, it's because the trustee, if they're also raising the children, they might start to think, well, this is a pretty big job, and my kids, they really love movies, or not my kids, the kids that I'm raising now, they like movies, so we'll just use some of this trust money to build a movie theater in my basement, and that's really for them, right? It's really not an appropriate use of funds. Same with the animals. People just might get tempted to use some sticky fingers and take some of that money and spend it for things that it really wasn't intended for. You might have a caretaker that you have full 100% trust in, and it might not be a problem. But I'm just saying, ideally, you would have a different person in charge of the money as the person that's raising the animals.
Yeah. Are the trusts pretty flexible? Like you could, require a certain amount to be left behind for, burial, or, even things like that. Or, I mean, I assume you can be as creative as you want to be.
Like burial for the pets?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you could absolutely do that.
Sprinkled over Yankee Stadium, stuff like that.
That's right. And you actually mentioned, or were about to a little bit ago, I think, about communicating about your animal to the caregiver. And that's a really great idea. And, over time, I've created like a little workbook where it's just, tell me about the animal's health conditions and what do they like to do. And basically the same thing parents do for their children, to leave behind sort of a way for that guardian to be able to raise the kids in the way that I would have.
Right.
Of course, it's a bit different for a pet, but it's the same type of idea.
Well, that's interesting. Well, I mean, this is definitely a topic that I don't think a lot of people really put a lot of thought into. It's really interesting. You can have trust for a lot of different things. And so this is somehow, people can apply this for the loved animals in their life as well. Well, this has been really good, Russ. Do you have anything you want to wrap up with us here? We're a little short of 2:30, but I know that we can go ahead and wrap up here.
Yeah, I mean, number one, whatever you do, whether it's in legal documents or not, you want to communicate with potential caregivers so that there's someone that's willing to step forth and raise your animals if you're incapacitated or you pass away. The best way to do it is in your will or in your trust. Create this little pet trust for your animals, name a caregiver and some backups. Number two, name a trustee, person that's going to be in charge of the money. And then three, designate where that money that remains, if any, goes when the last pet passes away. Make it legally effective so you have certainty that it's going to work. And then, make sure you communicate with these people so that they know what their role is when you're incapacitated or when you pass away. I'd say that's really it in a nutshell. Just start thinking about how you'd want this to play out, and then make sure you document it legally, and you'll rest easier, just as you do when you do your normal will or trust planning.
Well, that's great information. Really, I'm glad we brought this to the forefront. Hopefully people can kind of think about it a little bit more next time they do their estate planning, and definitely appreciate you, as always, being part of this great program. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll stick around after we close out the program for any questions, if anybody has any. Otherwise, thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for being here, and have a great weekend, and we'll see everybody on Monday.
Thanks, Jay.